Between Us. This is Between Us, a podcast of Blue Alliance IT employees building relationships through tough conversations in work and life. I'm your host, Alina O'Donnell. Please note, the topics discussed in this episode are about Black and white relations, racism, and systemic racism. For some, this might be triggering. This can be especially true for African Americans who too often are the go-to folks when acts of violence about African American deaths are in the news. For those who are neither African American nor BIPOC, these may be triggering because you've tried to have these conversations, but maybe failed or worse, were rejected. We ask everyone to listen and hold with respect this retelling of two lives and one relationship. This personal conversation shifted a decades-long friendship into a new frontier and made us better together. In this three-part series, the viewer gets an honest look into a sisterhood between two women, one white, one Black, who discovered that they can have real, meaningful conversations, work through racial healing, and make meaningful change. Between Us is what they built in the 2 years since the summer of 2020. Here's my friend, Alexia Zigoris, and me, between two best friends. Thank you so much for being here, Alexia, joining our podcast of Between Us. And I'm excited about talking about our 25 plus year relationship, how it has changed and grown over the years, and really what happens as, So tell me, let's start with, how we met and where we met.
So we met at a little church in Wyoming, Wyoming Baptist Church. So I was new to Cincinnati and did not have a lot of friends, and found this small church that was adorable. Tulips were coming up. It was spring. And that's where my husband and I and our two kids started going to church. Now, it was largely an older population at the time. So when anybody young showed up, I was extremely excited. And Alina, you showed up, and she was this dynamic woman who had these worldly experiences. And I was like, oh, I want to get to know you. So I was the one who pursued the relationship with you. And that's how we met originally. And then we ended up teaching Sunday school together and having lots of fun moments raising our daughters together as well. So tell us about your experience, Alina.
I love your side of the story. Come on to the dark side. So this is my recollection of how we met. I certainly had seen you. My mother had told me about this little brilliant genius boy, your little toddler that you had, Nicholas. And I really met you just one-on-one when early June, 1 year, so that must have been like 1994. And I get a call, and you invited me over to your house that night, same day, for dinner.
For pizza.
Oh, for pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you remember pizza.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember dinner. And I was, at the time, and actually, I did not go to people's homes without bringing something. I didn't go empty-handed. And I didn't have any time to find anything, bring anything. And I was baking cakes during that stage of my life. And I had a tester cake that was half eaten. And so I decorated it up. And that's what I came. I came with a half-eaten cake.
It's funny because when you brought the cake, I thought, oh, she knows it's my birthday, but you didn't know until you got there. I
sure did not. So I ring the doorbell, and this cute little 4-year-old boy opens the door by himself. Red flag number one. And I, asked, is this, were you home and everything? And he said, it's my mom's birthday. And I am standing there, no, I did not. And what place am I coming to? Red flag number 2. And so I came inside, and your husband, he was working third shift at the time. And, we both had babies on our hips, and, she had a toddler. And here I am in a home with a half-eaten cake on this woman's birthday. And I just was thinking to myself, what did I get myself into?
Yes, but you handled it well. You went upstairs with my kids and made a card that said happy 27th birthday. So that would have been almost, well, a long time ago. We won't disclose.
Wow.
Yeah. So you made a little card. I still have that card. I found it recently. So it still exists. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And you probably thought, who is this woman who doesn't have any friends and invites a complete stranger over on her birthday? Right. And the truth was that I didn't have many friends. And I thought, like I said, you were someone I wanted to get to know.
Wow. So tell us, tell us how you came to that church, because I think that's really telling in some ways.
Yeah. So I had moved to the area and found this cute, it's a beautiful white church, and it's actually featured in some of the Cincinnati's beautiful windows. It has a beautiful stained glass window. It has a steeple. It looks like something you'd see in New England. Tulips were coming up. I was like, this is a pretty church. It's Baptist. It seems, I wanted something kind of, I just wanted a church that taught the scriptures, and, people were prayed, and I could kind of dig in and become a little bit more of a disciple and a woman of God and a mom and a wife and just a better person. I wanted a place to learn and grow, and I felt like that seemed like the right place. And it was pretty superficial, honestly, because it was just cute. That's what got me in the door. But the warmth of the people actually kept me, and your mom included in that, because your mom was part of that congregation before you came back.
Well, it certainly is a beautiful church. There's no doubt about it. People stop, they get married in the church, and you could ring the door, the steeple, the bell. And so it was a great place to grow up in. But me coming to that church, I was kicking and screaming, frankly, and very different. So it wasn't the idyllic church. At the time that we went, I was 11, so well before I met you. And my mother was seeking to become a pastor. She was in Bible college and needed a church to ordain her. And at the time, the Black Baptist churches in town, and we attended one, did not and refused to ordain women. Mom was even on the cover of our local newspaper here in Cincinnati, really admonishing the community about that. So this church, this little church in Wyoming, it said, we'd love to have you. And I was like, no, I don't want to go, and didn't have a choice. And, but it's the church I grew up in, and it's my family, but they are warm, and they're very different. And that's what I noticed as an 11-year-old, that church was different. They dressed different. They, were very quiet in church. They just some of the things that they did. Kids were allowed to like run around and sort of be kids in kid fashion in church, and that just wasn't the way that I grew up. And probably most prominently was we were the only Black people in this church and in that community, frankly. So that, I really felt very, very different, stand out. And even more so because Mom didn't change who she was. And so we would be in church and she would say, amen. And you could hear it, or mercy. So
church was very quiet unless you were singing.
Right.
There was no clapping or encouraging the pastor to continue or anything like that. It was very much pulpit, and congregation just sat very quietly. So yeah, your mom added a lot to the church service. We always knew when she disagreed with the pastor. I don't even know if he knew that or not. That's pretty funny.
No, that was her way.
That was her way of like,
So that community
was great.
Really influenced my upbringing. And so for us, even though my mom became a pastor when I was 11, in our home, even before then, church was a hub. Yes, Sundays were days where we went to church and Sunday school, but truthfully, our faith was just infused in who we were. My family, coworkers, my mom's coworkers, the community. So, we were used to having prayer groups, visiting many different churches, and especially Bible studies. And I know one thing that I do now that even some of people that know me, it's a different for them. And it was something that I just learned in our home, like my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, my mom, and we would pray on the phone. And even at one point having, when we had, house phones, that we had two house phones, and one phone had a recording. It was actually called the prayer line. So you would call and you would get a prayer for the day that mom recorded. So
yes, I do remember that.
So that was just who we were.
What was that message?
Oh, it changed all the time. It really did. It was, so that was just a part of us. Yeah. So part of my upbringing was certainly in church, and how that influenced me and my life is really me being more introspective, with my relationship with my faith.
And opening your heart to this woman who invited you over with no knowledge of her birthday. Right. Thank goodness you're a woman of faith.
Yeah. So tell us, I still can't believe that. Tell me about your upbringing, and how did it influence you as a young mother at the time?
Yeah, so I grew up largely, my father had custody of me until I was 11, and then my mother took over from there until I was 18. So the first half was my dad was a professor at a university. We had a largely ethnic and cultural experience with all of the students and the student body. And so he gravitated toward all of these cultural experiences, which we went along with for the ride. Whereas like your mother instilled values in you. It was kind of osmosis for me. I was just around it all. So, so that was very rich for me. And I felt like I was pretty open-minded, which would later come back to be like, well, really, am I as open-minded as I think? But we'll get to that one in a later episode. But first of all, I felt like I had this rich experience as a child. And then when I moved in with my mom and her new husband in a very small town in the middle of Illinois, kind of farm country, it was all white except one black family in that community. And growing up, well, when I first moved there, it was, you start school in August, and I have a Greek background. And so my skin turned really dark over the summer. So when I arrived in August with the name Alexia Zigoris, and everybody else was Kims and Susies and Cheryls and, all of those wonderful names, all those not ordinary names, but mine was a little bit more exotic sounding. And they were like, who are you and what are you? Like, so that was my indoctrination into this very Midwestern small town community. So I had that experience growing up, and basically became part of that community just like anybody else, went to high school, graduated, and went on to college. So by the time I got to this point in my life where you met me, I'd not really grown up in a church. I was hungry for people to be in community with who could help me to become the person I wanted to be and to honor God with my life. So that's what drew me to church in the first place as an adult. It wasn't because of a family lineage that you got to go to church, you got to do this, you got to do that. It was an internal drive for peace and for love and for self-discovery and for honoring God.
So let's go back to the small town. You told me a story once that during the summer when you come back from school, you're a brown-skinned girl.
Yeah.
And, tell us that story and how that you stayed with you.
There was this one boy who teased me. I mean, today we would call that bullying, but back then it was just teasing. So anyway, I guess it was still bullying, but he called me names, and names that I will not repeat on anywhere because it's offensive, but he didn't know what I was and was just giving me a hard time. And so my brother was 2 years older, already in high school, and had friends. And one of his friends was Todd. His name was Todd. And he was a wrestler. And he was one of the few black boys in our school, and he heard about what this other boy was doing to me. And I think it's funny because my brother didn't stand up for me, but Todd did. Todd went to this kid at a basketball game on a Tuesday night and kind of looked at this kid who he looked down on, right? So this kid is little and he's this big high schooler who's a wrestler, built and bulky. And he was like, "Are you messing with my friend?" And the guy was like, "No, I'm not. I'm just, like, please don't hurt me." And he just looked at him and he said, "Don't mess with my friend." And the guy stopped immediately. And that made a huge impact on me because the person who came to defend me was somebody who didn't look exactly like me, but maybe there was just something that he knew about being, teased or bullied that I didn't know at the time, and he stood up for me. So that definitely stood up there. I've never forgotten that.
Thank you for sharing that, because those are so many stories in my life as well. Like, what are you? Who are you? Where did you come from? Are you this? Are you that? And, I'm mixed race. And on top of that, I have a lot of hair, very curly. So when it's out, people automatically want to touch it. I'm Hawaiian. So, throw that in the mix and nobody knows what you are. But really, coming back to how my upbringing influenced me, in our home. So just as we had prayer groups, we had a variety of people in our home. So they were from all walks of life, and Mom's close relationships were people from all walks of life, all races, all backgrounds. So you use the term that with your dad, that you were around different people through osmosis. And that's a really apt term, because I think that there's a level of osmosis for me that I picked up, but my mother was intentional with the types of people and experiences. So I always had to be in somebody's camp or somebody's, like even coding school. And that was back in the 80s, by the way. So programming and things that were, she was someone who forced me to just go beyond my comfort zone. And so, and as I grew up, especially in my teenage years and beyond, it just was very easy for me to be with different people and then understand that part of their cultural makeup was important to who they were and not erasing that.
Right.
Because a lot of people will say, well, you're not really Black, or you're not really this, or I don't see Black when I see you. And there's an international organization that I've been involved with just since I was a kid. And, their one of their taglines is, "How alike am I to you?" And part of how alike I am to you is finding out these are the ways that we are different that make us special, and finding out how alike I am to you so that we can really create a world of peace, right? So,
yeah, I think that, the wisdom of your mother in exposing you to those things intentionally, like she built these qualities into you and these experiences into you because she knew that in order for you to embrace them, you had to experience them. So that was part of what she was doing to bring that beautiful kaleidoscope to your life, which is probably the reason that you do the work that you do now professionally. So think about, all of that, how it culminates in who we are and what we bring into the work world.
So did we ever discuss race in our relationship back then?
It really wasn't a topic. I think that, I knew, I knew who you were, and I knew your mom was, and I've been in your home and around your family and your friends. You exposed me to and introduced me to so many other women of color that I became friends with ultimately. So, but we never talked about what you experienced as a woman of color. Never talked about that until much later. It was probably 10 years before that conversation. Maybe it was because we were busy raising kids. Maybe we were working. Maybe we were just trying to figure out life, 20s, all of those things were going on in our heads. I know that you experienced that while we were friends, but it wasn't part of our dialogue.
So what I would say is tune in for everyone, because we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what happened when we started discussing race. And so if you're up for it, let's talk about that next time. Yeah,
let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. This is Between Us, a podcast of Blue Alliance IT employees building relationships through tough conversations in work and life. I'm your host, Alina O'Donnell. I'm over culture and inclusion at Blue Alliance IT. This podcast is about sharing my stories of courageous conversations and to be a launching pad for you to have yours. Through these stories, you'll hear from others who struggle with these types of confrontations, how to persevere, and learn how to be more conscientious in your interactions. We invite real people to have real conversations and take real action. They may be hard, they may be hurtful, but with love and understanding, in the end, they can make us better.
Really speak right into the mic. I mean, massively into the mic.
I love being the guinea pig for this. You're welcome, everyone at Blue Alliance.
Take 20.